Would like to welcome everybody to Syracuse, New York. Welcome to CCA 2025, Take 2. This morning we are presenting our breed education seminar, and we have Marcy Fine of Overland Collies, Lynn Butler, Lotta Hedman, Milas Collies. We're going to do a little bit, we wanted to create a really casual atmosphere, right? We wanted to just have a fireside chat, except we forgot our little fireplace for a little ambiance. So we're going to give you guys an opportunity to get to know Marcy and Lynn and Lotta, what drove them, how they came into the breed, and then what drove them to make some of the breeding choices that they made, right? And how things clicked or nicked, right? How they chose dogs given attributes or things that they were specifically looking for, as they made those choices. And the reason that we coined this as outside the box is because we want you guys to maybe listen, not maybe listen, but to listen, maybe gain some inspiration from the choices that they made and how you could apply it to a breeding choice that you might be considering. If there is something that sparks you, there are nuggets on the table, right? And we invite you to take either a chocolate nugget or a gold nugget and stick that in your pocket as a reminder of something that you picked up at this year's breed education seminar. So with that, a little couple of housekeeping items. Cell phones, we would ask you to silent those or turn your ringers down, please. Bathrooms, you guys have all had breakfast and you've had some coffee and some juice. Got a water station. Our bladders are going to kick in. So bathrooms are down the hall, right? Just get up and help yourselves to the bathroom. We're not going to force you to sit in your seats and suffer. So bathrooms, cell phones. With that, we're going to go ahead and get started, okay? And then we'll have questions and answers. We'll move through the audience. If there's something that is, burning question in your mind, when we get to that, just write it down. You've got the books that we prepared, and there is history and there's pedigrees and that kind of stuff. Those are for reference. We'll talk about the dogs, so there is an opportunity for you to go and look at those pedigrees when we get to that section and we talk about the dogs. The placemats are yours to keep, right? That will give you like a homework assignment and some things that we have included for you that talk about our breed. And in the book is also how to view a national, right? So if this is your first time, welcome. If you need any help during the week, you've got Lori Jeff Greer, Kelly Neely, Courtney Dowling, and myself. Find us and we'll help you. The other thing is, with attending this seminar, you will get an opportunity to have some ringside mentoring during the week. We have sign-up sheets that will be available later so that you can pick a cluster of classes to sit through with a mentor and just take a look at the dogs, right? You're right up front, you're next to Irv, we've got educational, we've got access to his videos, so, or to his screenshot, his live streaming that we can use as an educational tool. The dogs actually stop and you can ask the handlers any questions and that kind of stuff, and as they move around the ring. So, we would just ask for you not to plant yourself during the week, otherwise Kelly and I are gonna kick you out. So we want to make sure that we have room for everyone and that they can rotate through and see specials and see puppies and see open dogs and that kind of stuff. So just be cognizant that there are 60 other people in here that are going to want to be mentored during the week, okay? With that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to move to my chair. I want a footstool. That's okay. All right, so
Well, come up a little closer. And we can
I could, I could just sit right here,
footstool. I
right?
don't need it.
I could like sit,
Yeah, there is
I
one.
could do this, right? Hey,
Don't lean back. I'm
Right,
not
yeah.
catching you.
Yeah, no kidding. So again, super casual conversation, right? So Lynn, I'm going to start with Lynn. Give us a little bit of background about yourself. A lot of people may not know that you are a professional photographer and an artist.
I've been showing and working with photography, and it was a big interest of mine about environmental problems and the way that the earth was getting destroyed by the industry. And just by chance, my first book was with a doctor whose specialty was lead poisoning. And there were 10 different doctors: asbestos, chromium poisoning, and I worked with the doctors in a very polluted area of the iron-bound district of Newark, which, as you go down the thruway or 95, you can smell that for a very long time. And so that was the first part of the work. And I was always interested in the Native Americans and their love of horses and not taking except what they needed from the land. And so that became a focus point for me. And I tried between different parts of the time that I had with the dogs to go and live with some of the Native Americans and work with them. And I actually started a book about almost 50 years ago with the major tribe was in California, the Esalen Indians, which most people don't even know. They've heard of Esalen Institute, but they don't realize it was a tribe. And they were one of the first to be wiped out by the California missionaries, except for a few that hid and lost their land. And I worked with them in the beginning, and then the Onondaga tribe, which you probably passed on your way up here with the chief of the Five Nations, and Chief Shenandoah, who died probably 25 years ago. Well, finally, for one reason or another, that particular book never got out, got published. And the chief of the Esalen tribe called me about 2 years ago, and they had 47 acres. And he said, we got our land back, which is, they have now 200,000 acres in California. And he said, come back and photograph the newer land and we'll get the book out finally. And he gave me the motivation. I had had some illnesses, and to get out of bed, I told him I wasn't going on a horse into the wilderness. I have to do it from the back of a truck or something, I wasn't the same as I did when I was started with that book, and we actually got the book out. So that's pretty much my background, and probably without Lotta coming, I never would have actually even gotten to do those things, because you just can't leave the dogs and work with them.
So let's talk about that. How did you and Lotta meet and form your relationship or your partnership?
I started with the collies when I was a teenager, and got my first collie actually from Tocallan through Glenn Twyford and Postscript. It was a son of Postscript, who I never realized was a double dilute at the time. And so I think Lotta came, about 38 years
almost
ago.
38 years ago.
So, and I started with the dogs almost 60 years ago, 50, maybe 58 years ago. And so a friend of hers from Sweden, who's now an international judge, Thomas Rowland, who judges all over the world, came and worked for me and decided he was going to go and work with Alex de Cavallo in Brazil. And he said, but I know someone in Sweden who'll come and works with collies, and maybe she'll come and help. And Lotta was 18 when she came.
Yeah.
And so that's
A long time ago.
a long time ago. So.
We have no math majors in the crowd, okay?
I was going to say, was almost your first show that show at Western PA under Trudy?
It was, no, that was not my first show. That was the second year.
That was the second.
That was the second year, yeah. It was, the first show I ever showed to was under Carol Phelps, actually. No, that was the second year too. Actually, the first show I ever showed to was, I think that was the first year, actually, was under,
We must have been doing sweeps.
yeah, Carol Phelps did the
She did
sweeps.
the sweeps
And,
there.
Yeah.
And Trudy did.
yeah, it was Western PA was the first shows I ever
just
showed to, yeah.
remember that because first class of dogs that walked in the ring under Trudy, these little baby 6 to 9 puppy
Yeah.
dogs, and she threw half of them out of the ring because their incisors.
Yeah, they
were
were,
all-
yeah, I
Her
remember that.
incisors hadn't grown all the
It
way
might have been
in
the
yet.
first shows I ever went to. I
Yeah.
don't remember.
Some of
I
those
remember my
things just
first
stick in your
national was
mind.
Colorado, in '89. Yeah, that was my first national.
So he makes the recommendation that maybe there's somebody in Sweden that could come and help you. You meet Lotta, Lotta comes over, right?
Yeah.
And so give us a little bit about your background as to how you got into dogs.
I was into horses, and I had a friend of mine that did rehab with trotters, and that's how and she actually bred collies as well. And, but I wasn't really into the dogs, and, but she had some collies and started breeding collies, and she got more and more into the dogs, but I was really into the horses. I rode like 5-6 horses a day.
But I have to force her to,
to
now ride any of my horses. So.
It's like, but she got more and more into the dogs, and then we went more and more to dog shows, and, I was really, really into the horses until I got really, really hurt. I had like 3 really bad accidents in a row. I got, I fell, got the horse on top of me, landed on a rock, it's like, so I had 3 really bad falls in a row. And that kind of ended my thing with the horses. I just did not really want to, because I'd really injured my back. And and then I just got more and more into the dogs. And then Thomas asked me to come, and I said, no, I got to finish college first. So, because I was 17 at the time, and I said, well, let me know if you have something in a year. And he's like, okay. So a year later, he's like, oh, you want to come? And I was like, okay. So off I went, and then I came, and that's how I came. And I was just going to come and stay for a little bit, and here I am.
And fast forward almost 38 years. You're still here, right?
I'm still here, yeah.
That's awesome. We love you.
Yeah.
So Marcy. Yes. So give us a little bit of background about you and how you got started, because your mother, right?
Well, she had bought me a collie when I was 2 years old. And he was the dumbest dog on the face of the earth. She took him to Gervais obedience school for 2 years.
And he still didn't get it.
He finally finished his CD, but I just wasn't interested in, because he couldn't learn tricks. He just was a buddy. And when he passed, a friend of my mother's friend, who they had done synchronized swimming together, Pat Gorka, raised collies. And she said, well, I'll give you a collie, and we'll breed her, and you can keep a puppy. Okay, well, that's when I got started. I was in competitive swimming and gone a lot. And
Did anybody know that about Marcy? No. Right? So fun facts, right? Like we're going to get them to share some personal fun facts. Competitive swimmer, right? Okay.
Yes.
We can't hear Marcy back here.
Okay. Can you hear me now? No? Yes? Okay, then I'll put my outdoor voice on. Okay, yeah, since I was 8, I was, shall we say, a very busy child. And my mother got me into swimming. At that time, they had like Pepsi and Coca-Cola sponsored swim teams, which involved being at the pool at 6 o'clock in the morning, going back to the pool after school, keeping me busy so I was exhausted when I got home. And then we had that first litter of collie puppies, and I was like hooked. I was ready to age out. I wasn't good enough for the Olympic team. So at that time I was 16, I bought myself a car, and I went to dog shows.
So what dog did you take to dog shows? When you were 16 years old, you've got your driver's license, you bought your first car, and you're like, I'm not going to do the swimming thing, but I'm headed to the dog shows.
I'm headed to the dog show. The male we had kept from the first litter had a detachment. This was back in the early 60s, and mother was normal-eyed, but he had a detachment, so he went to a pet home. But I decided I was going to buy a show dog. Now, I had been working since I was 12 doing jobs. And I went Dorners, which were people that were getting out of collies, but they had a lot of Cherryvale, which was very big at the time. And so I went and bought what I thought was going to be a brood bitch. And this bitch was a nice bitch, a nice starter bitch. Only trouble is, she never had puppies. Bred her 4 times, never had puppies. I did put majors on her, which was very difficult to do back in the late 60s with a kid that was driving around by herself, but I learned a lot. And turned out it was a really good thing that she never had puppies, because coming into the early 70s, PRA started raising its head. Now, she was normal-eyed, but I looked at her pedigree, and I'm going, I got one of the lucky ones, because both of her parents were carriers. I just happened to get one that wasn't affected, but didn't breed her. So I saw a dog in the ring. I had spent all those years showing this bitch, learning, finding what I wanted a collie to look like. And I saw a mahogany sable dog owned by Marty Runge in Chicago, and his name was Champion Baymar's Coming Attraction. And this was before he won the national. He was a young dog, and I'm going, I want dogs like that. So I bred my one bitch that I had to him, finished my first champion sired by him, bought another puppy dog that was inbred by him out of Enterprise's sister. And I'm going, okay.
Is that the 2J's Hanover?
2J's Hanover Enterprise.
So
Yeah.
we'll try to use the full names of the dogs.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Right? No,
Yeah.
because we've got some new people, right?
Yeah.
So is everybody familiar with Enterprise? Have you heard the name? Okay. No? Right, okay. So 2J's Hanover Enterprise was bred and owned by Jim Fredrickson and Jim
He
No.
was actually bred by Carol Chapman. Yeah.
Okay.
And so I bought this sable puppy dog out of Hanover's Honey West and Coming Attraction. And that didn't work out so well because he bloated. Got him through bloat, bloated again. So I've already dodged the bullet of PRA, had a dog bloat, and I still wanted to show dogs and breed dogs because this is what I was put on this earth for.
And Marcy, that was, how long had you been in dogs when that was happening? It was a short span, right? Short time span?
Short time span. Yeah.
So,
I bought my first show dog in '66, and this happened late '60s, early '70s. They were doing PRA test breedings by then, because the only way you could tell, there was no blood test. You had to breed to a dog that was blind, and then you had to euthanize the puppies to check to see by electroretinograms if your bitch was a carrier by breeding to a blind dog. If you didn't have any puppies that were PRA blind, then your bitch was good to go.
but to put yourself through that,
Yep.
right, and to agonize, right, you've planned a litter, you know you're going to do a test breeding, and you know that you're going to euthanize all of those puppies, right?
Yep.
How many people did that back then? Not a lot, right?
Not a lot.
Right.
Not a lot, but you had to.
But you
there
had
was
to,
no other
right.
way to clear your dogs.
bitch, right?
Yeah. your
Especially
bitches.
if you had one that people were breeding.
Right.
You had, it forced you to
Yeah,
do
right.
that.
It forced you to do. If you had a stud dog and you didn't know if they were a carrier, you would get a blind bitch to breed to that stud dog, and you had to have 7 puppies in order to clear your dog.
Okay.
So it was, you had to really be dedicated to do that.
7 puppies from the same litter?
If you had to have
Yeah.
7
It was a
puppies
total
out
of
of
out of the same bitch.
out of the same bitch.
Right.
You
So-
could have 2 litters, but you had to have 7 puppies. They figured that was where you could be like 99% sure that your dog was not a carrier. And those were not puppies that you could sell. The only way you could do that was to euthanize them and do electroretinograms. Yeah,
And it was at 8 weeks,
at 8
Yeah,
weeks.
you have to raise them, you
So
know.
you had to raise them,
Yeah.
and then you knew what their fate was,
Yeah.
right? So, go ahead, hold on. And I want you guys to do this. So ask
Yeah.
questions, and we'll have like again, casual conversation, right?
And the worst part of having to do that was when you took him into the vet and the little receptionist had a look on her face of like, you're doing this to these puppies.
Yeah.
You know, that was the hardest part for me.
Well, because all puppies are cute, right?
Oh,
All
yeah.
of them are cute.
Yeah.
Forgive my naivete, but why did they have to be dead to do this test? I don't know what this test involves.
I don't know what it was, but it was the only way they could hook electrodes up, and it just wasn't beyond my
It's not like a test
comprehension.
that you could put an eye drop in, right, and wait for the eye to dilate and that kind of stuff, so, and couldn't sedate them, no. So you're running this electromagnetic test on their actual eyeballs, right?
Because you couldn't, to do an eye check on a puppy that's going to go blind, they aren't blind when you do the eye check.
Right.
And they're not blind when they're 10 weeks or 12 weeks. You know, that was the only way to clear your dog.
I give you a lot of kudos for going through that. I don't know if I could.
Well, I'm just saying, a lot of people couldn't do it, but, thank God for the people that did have the stomach to do it because they loved the breed.
I have the utmost respect for you guys that had to deal with that. I came into the breed from Labradors, and it was when it was first starting back in the 70s, and you don't know what you don't know,
Yeah.
And my question when I brought my bitch to be bred was, his dog's beautiful, dual champion, English, Canadian, and American, amazing dog. And I said, what about PRA? All I knew was, what about PRA? I didn't know another question to ask. I didn't know any more about it. And she said, oh, we don't have a problem with that. Well, we did, and it turned out my bitch was a carrier, affected, so we had to have everybody spayed and neutered. They weren't blind, but
Right.
so you guys that did this, when I came into Collies, I was so grateful that you guys had been working on it, because that was early 80s, and you had made such huge progress with it, and we all benefited from that. And if you've ever had to cull, and we raised and showed rabbits and horses and dogs, and if you ever have to cull a puppy, it's heartbreaking. The part of you that is sensible says, I need to do this. The other part of you says, oh God, I hate doing this. But you have to do what's right for your breed. And what they did was hard. It was heartbreaking, but it was so incredibly beneficial. We owe them all a great round of applause for looking out for our breed and setting us up to be successful. Thank you.
You're welcome. And, you know, I don't know if I could do it again.
The older I get, the harder I find it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was lucky I never had to do it. I just somehow, on my second litter, I bred to a son of impromptu Ricochet, and there was PRA, but
Yes.
not him.
Yeah.
And so I bred to Champion Clarion's Night Rider, and he was okay. And then the one other time that Judy Evans had brought a dog Break8, Champion Break8 in the blues
Yep.
at stud to her house, and I bred to him, and it was a normal eye bitch, so the puppies all had to be never bred, but I never had to put them to sleep. That probably would have stopped me. I have a feeling I would have quit. So I couldn't have done it. I don't, you know.
It
so,
only happened to me one time.
yeah.
And then, by then, you learned, you had to let everybody know what was going on in order to work yourselves out of it.
People didn't like it.
Oh, no, they didn't like it. I mean, there were witch hunts. I mean, it was,
Unfortunately,
Don't talk about that because it's taboo, or
you know,
Like,
a
there's-
dog would just disappear and nobody would know what happened. Yeah.
But I think it's like anything that you hit, and you know, it's like, would you ever do it again? You know, I mean, that's reality. I mean, it's like you do stuff and then you're like, would you ever do that again? You know, I mean, just, you know, I mean, it's like you just have to deal with it and then you move
Yeah.
on, and you know, but would you do it again today?
Well, I wouldn't voluntarily do
Right.
it, but if I was stuck in the middle of it.
Right, exactly, and then you just have to deal with it. I mean,
we're lucky. We have
Yeah,
blood
exactly.
tests now.
Yeah,
right,
we have
I mean,
blood
there's,
tests now.
to get out today, you
that
are
there's a
so
lot of ways
fortunate.
to find out.
well,
about the
and
health.
there's been so much research, right?
Right.
That we've been fortunate to have Dr. Aguirre at Cornell,
Right.
who did all of the PRA research. I mean, we're not talking about Lori, right? But I had a dog that had late onset PRA. He had a partial detachment and was functionally blind in the left eye, right? And the breeder never did a puppy, never did an eye check. They said affected is affected is affected. The worst he can be is affected. So not true.
Also, there
Right.
was another problem at that time, too, that the ophthalmologists in the beginning had very different ideas of what was a good eye check. And you could have a dog checked by the head of the University of Pennsylvania or Cornell, who really were the top university, the top veterinary schools, send it out west and get somebody who another ophthalmologist that was trained differently, that would say, oh, this dog is, blind or something wrong with it, or because it was a merle, they couldn't read the, the eyes. So it was very difficult. There wasn't uniformity in eye checks early on. And, it's definitely much better now.
Hold up.
I'm loud.
So we seriously, we're filming for posterity, right? And for the archives. So we want to make sure that Irv gets it, right? Because we're also giving them like the presentation at the end. So, okay.
Well, even some of the ophthalmologists today that do eye checks, just 2 years ago, I had a litter of a lot of blues. The first eye check was small colobomas. It took her 15 minutes to decide. And then she was all over me about, why are you breeding these little bitty eyes? And, I said, I'm not trying to. And my dog's eyes weren't little, but a lot of these veterinarians I think that collies have little eyes. Needless to say, it took her 15 minutes to finally make a decision on 2 of my favorite puppies. So, okay, that's what it is. So I go and I'd never rechecked eyes before. I just took their word for it when they saw colobomas. I went to 2 separate vets. They were about 2 weeks apart in age. It was about 3 weeks later. So by this time, 9 to 10 weeks old, 10 to 11 weeks old. I took one to a show, and I took one to an eye veterinarian close to us. Both of them negative. Could not find a coloboma in either one of those puppies. So now I have 2 eye checks 2 years ago. What do I do? 3 out of 5? 4 out of 6? I mean, what do you do in that situation?
Right. Well, you're lucky you still had them. Right. Because unfortunately, we've listened and sold a dog because of an eye check and found out later that they were totally wrong.
Yeah.
And that happens quite a bit. And you depend on the ophthalmologist
Right.
for what you're keeping. So
So the colobomas, once they have one, it's not going to get bigger or smaller,
No.
it stays the same?
It is what it is.
yeah.
It is what it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
And also where it is in the eye has to do
Well,
with,
yeah, that makes a big difference.
Vision.
So let's just talk about it a little bit, right? So a coloboma is a hole, right? A staphyloma is a
bulb.
right? Does that help you? So the coloboma is actually, and you can have colobomas in different places, right?
It's like looking through it's like there's a spot in the middle of the eye, like a dark spot, and then a hole, and you see around it, yeah.
Right.
Not that we're having an eye clinic, but there is an eye clinic here during the week,
There is.
sponsored by Collie Health Foundation. Okay. So let's get into so you talked a little bit about your breeding and the puppies that you had to put down, right, because of PRA.
Yeah.
Was that, we know how difficult that was, right? So from there, what did you move forward with?
Well, you just had to research pedigrees because by then you were able to see from who people found out were known carriers. You were able to see how to get around it.
But were you guys talking amongst yourselves? Were
Not
you
so
just
much.
watching what everybody
You
was
were
doing?
watching. You were watching. Now, Sue Barlow was Dorothy Sturm's daughter, and she was kind of the clearinghouse in the Midwest for finding out who had what problem. And so it was, you just had to study pedigrees like mad. You had to.
I was going to, and when I started with the Tocallan, he was really a pet, and I was working for a kennel in Vermont called Friendship Collies, and they used him at stud. They liked him.
So which Tocallan dog?
He came from Postscript. He through Hilda Rickenbach, not through Glenn Twyford at the time. And I kept a female who was, a pet. I'd say she was pet quality, and gave her to my brother as a pet, and bought a bitch from Barbara Kellogg. And at that time, she was out of Deb Hill was Barbara Kellogg, and she produced the dam of Full Dress, Champion Glen Hill Full Dress. So I had a puppy from her with she told me that she would have to decide who to breed her to, and as far as what stud dog I would use. And years later, not very much later actually, I ended up to see a dog in North Carolina at the shows that belonged to Lila Bates. She had imported Champion Briarwood Gold Emblem. He had won Crufts, but the dogs in England at that time looked like American dogs. They didn't look like the chow, ugly dogs, English
Like the really
type.
bad haircuts and the
They looked
short heads
chow-like
and
and bad temperament. It was a very different breed of dogs. And that particular dog that came over was sold because the litter brother was bigger than most of the English dogs, and the litter brother was a little bit smaller, and the breeder, Briarwood Collie, she had lost her son, so she was kind of getting out of it and allowed the dog. The problem in this country was at the time, we never saw the good English dogs over here because they could get a lot of money for them in Europe and in Australia, and so people didn't buy. The ones that came over here were really more pet quality but the reason I even brought it up, I ended up to do the breeding of my Viley Glen Hill bitch that I started with to the English dog, and he was a non-carrier for normal eyes. So in the beginning, I started with having normal eyes, and we didn't test the normal eyes. Some were carriers and some weren't from that litter. But most people also were not interested. It was as though in this country at the time, it was though I bred to like a beagle or something, because the English dogs, we never saw really good ones. That dog I saw him in the show ring, and he was beautiful. And he just, extremely good profile. And Lila Bates became a mentor, and I actually went, and she also raised Arabian horses, and I went with her to Europe to buy dogs and horses and learned a lot from the breeding. But when it came time to do another breeding from that, the type that they looked like were Branwyn, and there was nothing really on either side of the pedigree, definitely not the English to breed to, that were over here. And the Viley at that time, there was nothing really on the mother. So when I did that breeding and kept some puppies out of it, the dog that looked in type the most like was the Clarion dogs or the Branwyn dogs. So I ended up crossing and then later going back in with the dogs, but did start with really good eyes in the beginning, coming from the English dogs. And also many people think that normal-eyed means bigger eyes, and it absolutely doesn't, and in the eye shape. And I just, people say that about them. At this point, there's no way to get English dogs anymore. The quality.
So let's
is
talk about
terrible.
Lila just a little bit. So how does she get an opportunity to bring the English dog here? Like you said, his litter brother was bigger.
No, this one was bigger, so they
one was
sold
bigger,
him.
so they
Gold
sold
Emblem.
Gold Emblem
Right,
was bigger, so
right.
they sold him to
Their
Lila.
standard there is 2 inches smaller.
Yeah.
than what we have here. So he was actually really on the big side.
He was American size.
Yeah, he was American-sized dog, and
Yeah.
So did somebody find out that Lila was looking for an English import, or was?
I think she went to Crufts and her timing was good.
Was good, and
the
she's-
breeder just had a tragedy of that dog, and she had beautiful dogs because I went there and stayed with her and at her kennel before that happened, and she had really pretty dogs, and Lila just got that opportunity. But she had bought a lot of Belhaven dogs and bred from them, and she had some really pretty dogs, and she had enough money to be able to buy good dogs, so that's how she got them.
So let's talk a little more, because you have really gone outside the box. You've gone outside the country, right?
which is what I did
which is
later on.
which you did later on, and we're going to tie that all together, right? But what has, so that was your first breeding to the English import, right?
Mm-hmm.
So talk a little bit more about what you saw in the Brazilian dogs, how, like, get into that piece of Milas and how that evolved.
Well, the Brazilian dogs, he had the same idea basically. He started with Parader, Glen Hill, and English. He had Lady Park was behind his dogs, another line, and he's coming to the Nationals this year. He's in his late 80s and probably knows is one of the most knowledgeable people in collies. And he was pretty much had the same idea of what the dogs should look like that I did. And I saw pictures of his dogs, and he came to Atlanta when the Collies, the CCA was in Atlanta. And I guess we had a big garage where all the pens were the dogs. And he came and he focused on, I had a litter from, they were grandchildren of that original breeding. They weren't the original litter. And he saw a bitch called Champion Milas Gold in the Clouds, who, and the litter mate, Uncut Diamond, and some other ones. And they, in those days, they had a really big show like the Nationals the day before. To a show that, and she had gone winner's bitch the day before. Well, not when he saw her, and he saw her before that. But, she was his idea, and so the two of us ended up talking, and the pedigrees were basically the same. The problem with the Brazilian dogs are the American Kennel Club didn't allow us to register them in this country. And so I never could buy anything from him. But he was a really good breeder and in charge of what happened and knew to line bred and brought a lot of dogs over there. And probably about, I don't know, was Macho 30 years ago? Something
Came
like that.
in 96, I think is when
Finally, the AKC accepted the Brazilian pedigrees as being accurate. The reason they didn't is they didn't think that they were doing a good job in keeping track of the pedigrees. So finally, I was able to get a dog that had everything of his and the ones of ours behind it. And when that first litter was born, and my bitch was, she was 6.
So
yeah.
who,
When she
what
had
was
the
that
litter.
first litter?
That
What was
particular
that? Yeah, who were the parents of that first
It
litter?
was a bitch that we,
dance step of Milas.
yeah,
Lake
Lakeland's dance step of Milas was the mother, and that produced the 4 champions.
who was a litter sister to a dog that Marcy bred to.
Liquid shot in the
the
dark.
dark. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And
who produced those 4 champions, which
Yeah.
included Maya, who was winner's bitch at the National.
yeah, and 2 best in show sons and a 3rd champion. There were 4 of them, and we
4.
couldn't.
So can you guys name those? I know you
Yeah.
can. Name
Well-
that dog.
Another year or 2, and I might not be able to.
Well,
Who
yeah.
knows?
So,
Don't ask me that question now.
Yeah.
So who were those for?
It was champion Milas Latin dancer who won the nationals at about 9 months old.
8 months.
Yeah, 8 months. And champion Milas Latin Diva was the sister. Champion Milas Latin Fever, who actually went to Europe and got his international champion. They used him at stud. We let him go
To
for a while to
Thomas.
Thomas, the
Full
person
circle.
that had worked here, and Milas Latin Lover, who he never produced any puppies, unfortunately, because we took him to a specialist, Dr. Hutchison, who's in Ohio, who's a great fertility vet, and I think his first time we tried to breed him, he twisted over and flipped over and injured something, and they found that he had sperm, but there was some kind of a blockage that we never
couldn't figure it out. You know,
Right.
why he had sperm at every
stage
of production, but he couldn't figure out why he wasn't, producing, why there was nothing there.
Their father was Windhaven Stranger Paradise.
Yeah.
Correct?
Right.
How did you get him?
A friend of Lakefield, we had only two, at that point, we only had two bitches left. Two, both white factored bitches, and because I was working as a journalist and in Europe and gone a lot, and we just had those. And a friend who is a breeder of English Cocker Spaniels named Marcos Vinagre saw the litter from the Windhaven, and Windhaven had bought some dogs from us. It was someone who bred with Lakefield, and Antonine. And he died now, but he had bought a bitch of probably a daughter of one of the best bitches we ever had, champion
Didn't we
Milas
send him
Glory
two?
Bound.
Antonine? We sent him a couple of bitches.
Yeah, he had some, and so he
So I'm sorry, go back. What was the bitch's name?
he had a daughter of champion Milas Glory Bound, and her name was champion Milas Glory B. There were 4 sisters.
Right.
And so then he kept saying, I would like you to get a male so you could breed. And they picked out a male, a lot of good it did now if people see our dogs, but that was not white factored on purpose, because you can't have white factored and show them in Europe. You can, in Brazil or Argentina, you can breed them. Whereas in Europe, you can't, even if there are a few white hairs on the dog's body, it's hard to be able to get them to allow you to breed the dogs. And so he hoped that we had 2 white factored bitches, and they gave us the dog who was not white factored, but, and
They didn't want us to have whites.
yeah, and I said, and now,
Oh, well.
And that worked out how?
Yeah, real well.
Right,
at
real
the
well.
moment, we have a few whites.
I was gonna say, yeah.
Over the
like,
last few years.
Yeah, you've had
Like
whites.
half the kennel.
Because they were, we ended up to breed him to those 2 bitches, but then what we kept, there was half brother to half sister, we bred them back together because there was such an outcross, and ended up with the beginning of the whites that we had.
The endless avalanche of whites.
So Marcy, talk about how you intertwined in with the Lake Wind Shot in the Dark dog,
Okay, well,
because you both used him, right?
We had the sister.
You had the
who
sister.
had,
Yeah.
And I bred the shot.
some of our breeding behind it, her.
well, see, I grew up surrounded by parader type dogs. And because I thought Baymar's Coming Attraction was what my ideal was at the time, I started with dogs that didn't resemble what you guys had at that time. And because I was breeding to, one of my main mentors was Joyce Hauser. And she did have a white.
Of Twin Creeks Collies.
Yeah,
Okay.
but, I didn't like him. Oh well.
Most of them weren't too nice at that time. The
Yeah.
whites, I think the only one that was Flashlight,
Flash,
Glen,
yeah.
Champion Glen knows
Yeah.
Flashlight Lightning, but most of the whites
Yeah.
were not good quality.
Well, they didn't carry the undercoat and they didn't carry the bone
Yeah.
that the other families of dogs had. And we just figured it was because they were white. We didn't know why. But I had done enough close breeding because I'd always had a theory of Ben and Joyce would buy a male, breed all their bitches to that dog, and then when those bitches matured, they would buy another male. And the males that they had from those the litter mates to those sisters were the ones that they finished and sold. And at the time, they were doing very well financially selling dogs.
Right.
It's a different world now, but I had reached a point where I had a bitch that was sired by Bronze Talisman out of Endless Summer, who was winner's bitch at the National. And she didn't read the book on how you should breed to continue generation after generation, because I had bred her back to the sire's side, I bred her to the dam side, and nobody looked alike. And I'm going, how can this be? She's an Endless Summer daughter out of Bronze Talisman. How come none of her offspring looked alike? And I'm going, okay, well, what does this bitch need? Okay, she needed more length to her coat. She had a beautiful fitted coat, but it wasn't flowing. She needed a longer tail. Okay, I didn't bother me that much because usually, oddly enough back then, if the tail was a little on the short side, it probably wasn't going to go over their back. I don't know why, it's just how the genes were working. And I'm going, okay, I gotta find a dog that has these things. Don't care what the pedigree is. I'm gonna breed phenotypically. And I saw a picture. Nick and Joel showed this tri-dog named Lakewind Shot in the Dark. And I didn't know Carolyn from a hole in the wall. I knew the pedigree was an outcross because it was sired by a Gambit dog out of one of Val Nicetta's bitches that, looking at the pedigree, it didn't look like it was, the first 3 generations didn't look all that line bred or inbred. But when you go back to the 5th and 6th generation, every litter that a Long King Jones sired was in that pedigree. Now, he only sired 6 or 7 litters?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But every litter he sired was in that pedigree in 6 generations. So it was really tight, bred to an outcross dog who himself was tight.
Yeah.
And I'm going, okay, and it was tight for the things my bitch needed. So I did that breeding. And you keep what you make the breeding for. So I kept this blue bitch.
I remember her because I was
Yeah.
in Carolyn's kitchen when you show us the one you were keeping.
Mm-hmm. She had the neck, she was going to have the furnishings that I wanted, and she had the longest, prettiest tail.
And who did
have
that bitch grow up to become?
Champion Overland Freezing Rain, wrong.
Okay.
who she is the dam of Champion Overland Ice Storm. But as a puppy, when they go into that 3 and 4 month stage when they're flat coated, she didn't look like a whole lot because she didn't have the eye that I would normally have kept, but you keep what you made the breeding for. And she had 2 brothers, but nobody kept brothers from an outcross.
Right.
So
I think Carolyn kept one of them.
Yeah,
A tri-dog
Yeah.
in that group.
yeah, and I sold one tri-dog, a blue dog that was a very pretty dog, that to Joyce Richter, and then she was going out of dogs, and he ended up in California with the Hash sisters. And, oh no, I can't remember what his name is. I don't know if it's in here or not. But, no.
No.
No. But anyway, this blue dog, I can't remember who it was, Linda or Barbara showed him.
I
And
don't
just,
remember which dog it was.
and just finished him like in 3 shows.
Yeah.
And then they had, Gambit dogs were fairly well established, but they had done close breedings, and they were looking for an outcross. So they bred to the blue dog, and they kept a blue dog and a tri-dog that they finished that rejuvenated their breeding program,
Right.
because now they had all of these daughters that they could go forward with. And they bought another bitch from me that was related to the blue dog. And they didn't show her, but they bred her to a son of one of that blue dog that I sold out there, and got Aja. Now,
Aja, do you remember Aja's name? Spell him under?
Yeah.
Gambit
Yeah,
Spell him
Gambit
under,
Spell 'em
right?
Under,
Who
who won
won
the
the
parade
national under Les
Under Les
Canavan
Canavan
at the Oaks, Pennsylvania, right?
yeah. And so they have gone forward since then. But you look back 3 generations in their pedigrees, and oh my God, there's an Overland there, and there's an Overland down there.
Yeah.
But it blended well.
Right.
And I've been lucky enough that people who have gotten dogs from me or bred to our dogs, they blend well with a lot of families.
Right.
They play well with others,
They play well with others.
right?
But just remember, keep what you made the breeding for.
So
I think
there's the
that's the
nugget,
most important.
right?
I
Yeah.
agree.
There's
If
a nugget.
If it's not in the litter, don't keep anything. Because you're not going forward.
And even if it's not the best, you're so tempted. We've done breeding, and we should have kept something else, but was, attracted to another puppy that was not what we did the breeding for, and it didn't, it didn't improve.
You didn't go forward.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it
But
just.
that's the number one nugget. If you do a breeding, keep what you made the breeding for. If it's not there, don't keep it. If you just want a dog to show, fine, just keep the best one in the litter. Because what you made the breeding for may not be the best one in the litter. In fact, it probably won't be the best one in the litter. Like Freezing Rain, I didn't care for her eye. She needed a little more finish of muzzle. But I'm going, well, you know what? She was really sound, and she had beautiful outline, beautiful profile, and my dogs had pretty expressions and pretty decent muzzle, so I'm going, I can breed that back in, which is what I did. Bred her to Gathering Storm and got Ice Storm.
All those things. So he had all those things, so
Right, so it worked.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I think the bitch from the English litter that I ended up having most of the offspring was a bitch that, not the two champions, it was one that I sold to a professional horse rider. She rode one of my horses at the shows, and we begged her to come and let me do the breeding, and that was, she never got shown, but she was a beautiful bitch. She had, the other two were, I think, would have won over her in the show ring, but she was the one who produced Champion Milas Formal Sneakers, who produced probably Glory Bound, who was one of the best bitches we had at the time, and we were lucky enough to get her bred to Champion Paradise. Along came Jones and had 4 daughters out of that litter, but she, you know, she ended up to be the one that many dogs descend from, and she wasn't really the best of the 2 bitches.
Yeah, because you don't know what set of genes your dog has inside. When Endless Summer, she just produced what she was, no matter who she was bred to. But then you've got all of these sons and daughters, and you're going, okay, which one is going to be the producer? Because the one that's the best show dog may not be the best producer. And so it's kind of like going on an Easter egg hunt. Which is the one that's going to be the producer?
Yeah, and a lot of times they're overlooked. Like one was Champion Valley View's Whirlaway.
Yeah.
People didn't use him very much. And then his eye was a little lighter.
Yeah.
He just wasn't, you know, as beautiful as some of the other Brandwin line dogs, but was a really good producer, which luckily Judy Evans and other people found out later on that he was. And as far as the dog we got, the Windhaven Stranger in Paradise, he, if you bred him to the right bitch, you know, his profile wasn't, he was sound, he had the temperament, he had the health, you know, we could inbreed and never come up with anything, but he was full and stop, and, you know, he had his head detail it was good enough to finish here, but if you bred him to a good profile, because all the litter mates, that's another thing, to look at what the litter mates are, all had beautiful profiles, and they sent him to us because he was not white factored, so, but he was a really great producer. And
So if you know what you've got in your bitch,
Right.
and you know what you are trying to improve upon with her, is that how you choose a stud dog? Or maybe if the stud dog isn't, if he's got a lighter eye, or if his profile, you know where I'm going with this?
I know where you're going,
Okay.
and I got the answer.
I know you do.
That's why I'm asking the question.
Look at the litter mates to that stud dog. I have bred to dogs that were not the best one from that litter or from that family, but the litter mates, if I could only breed my bitch to his sister, that's the dog to breed to. If his sister or other siblings have everything that your bitch needs, he has it, but he's just not the best one from that particular litter. And I've done that several times, both in collies and in Belgian sheepdogs. I bred to a dog in Belgian sheepdogs named Johnsondale Jory v. Torbrook. And he had a sister that won the national 3 times. And I'm going, I love this bitch. Loved her, but can't breed my bitch to the sister. Right. So I bred to him to select what his sister looked like.
Does that make sense to everybody?
also, you, not recently, but with our dog, with Walker, Marcy put him up as a 6-month-old puppy
Yeah.
and bred to him, and then grew up 3 sons, and
A
to
litter of
decide which, and then bred them. That's really dedication to
Yeah.
see which was the producer.
Who's gonna-
So
of
you
that
kept
litter.
all, you
All
kept
of them.
all 3 litter brothers.
Yes.
Grew them out.
Yep.
For however long.
Finished them
right? Finished
all.
them all.
Finished them.
Finished them all. And then you bred them to bitches with similar attributes, different attributes,
Related
outcross
bitches.
related bitches. Okay.
Related bitches.
Okay.
Because they were an outcross. Well, technically, there was a little bit of Overland back there.
Yeah.
3 generations back.
Yeah.
But it was basically an outcross. But I wanted to find out who the producer was going to be in these boys.
And what'd you discover?
The one that I had sold to Mary Lee. She picked him up the week before COVID. And 6 months later, she gives me a phone call. You know, I've got to place this dog. I've got too many males, and nobody's ever going to buy dogs again. Nobody's going to buy puppies. And she said, is it okay if I place him? I said, no. I'll buy him back. And she says, well, when things get a little better, you can have him back, and I'll take a stud service on one of your other dogs, because that's what I paid for the dog. Okay, fine. And it goes on. I had sold him because he looked like Richie Rich, where the other 2 brothers looked more, one was a moderate dog, and
Right.
the other dog looked like he could have come from your house.
Right.
But it turns
Who we
out-
want to breed to. I
And,
like him.
and who is that?
Who-
Who is that dog?
His Champion Overland, walk on
Walk
by
on
the
by to Pleasant
Pleasant
Walk on by to
Acres.
Pleasant Acres.
Yeah, he's produced really beautiful
Yeah.
puppies.
But,
And,
you know, there is, and it just, you know, a pandemic happens and the dog gets to come back, and I eventually placed the other 2 boys after I had, you know, bred a bitch to them, and I'm going, but, you know, this one is the producer. So, but, you know, they were 3, 4, and don't place your boys. If you,
No. Well, people don't keep boys. I mean, I think
People
that's the
don't keep
thing.
boys.
You know, they just don't. I mean, I love the boys. I mean,
yeah.
obviously, we have like 1 million of them.
but
And people just don't. And I think that's very sad.
They're
And
harder
I
to place because, too, they become stud dogs,
Yeah,
and then they
I
lift their
know.
legs, and then what do you do to, where the bitches come in the house and they're pets and they're fine, but those Velcro diapers are actually the greatest for
Yeah,
putting them on and letting them come in the house.
I mean, it's,
because
you know, I mean, the
they're
males,
answer.
you know, I mean, we need good stud dogs. I mean, you
Yeah.
know, we need to have good stud dogs. I mean,
We
it's
do.
like, where are they? You know, I mean, really.
And typically, they're in somebody's backyard,
They
right?
are.
And,
And that's
and they're
reality.
neutered, right? Which
Right,
is
exactly.
super sad.
You know, and
Um,
some of them don't mature until they're older. I mean.
Well, and you don't give them time, right?
No, you
Or-
don't.
Or
You know, they have to grow up. I
grow
mean,
up, grow out, that
Yeah.
kind of thing, like, right? 3 to 5
Yeah,
years old.
exactly. I
And,
mean-
yeah.
You know, most of them finish young and, you know, and they're not ready. I mean,
And I think that too, in our litters, we've bred a few times and combined with Marcy
Right.
dogs, and she had combined with us, and they look different as puppies.
So we
You
want to,
know.
and we want to get into that, right?
Right.
So we've
Yeah.
got a break coming up, and there's a part of me that says, let's break now. And then even though it's 10, 12, and we have a break scheduled for 10:30, because what I really want to get into next is who chose who first? Like, who went, did you go to Milas? Did Milas come to Overland? Like, how'd that work, and what'd you do, and that kind of stuff? Because you guys have really complemented each other, and you've both kennels have garnered tons of success, right?
We actually have a ROM that being presented a bitch that's out of an Overland bitch bred to Walker.
Bred to
that
Walker.
Right,
was-
right.
Has
So,
about 10 champions.
If y'all are okay with it, let's go ahead and break now, right?
Okay.
And come back at 10:30 and we'll get into the blending of the kennels, okay?
And we're not just talking about our families going together.
No,
Right.
we're
This is a
talking
recipe.
Yes, it's a
Right.
recipe,
of
right?
how to do it.
Right,
Use whatever family you prefer,
right,
but follow some type of recipe
right.
to do that with the dogs that you're working with.
Yeah. I mean,
It's
there's-
hard because obviously with the zoning laws and not being able to keep dogs and what's gone on with the agricultural departments in this country, to keep a lot of dogs and grow them up is very, very difficult. But I'm glad I lived at the time I did and not now.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's hard.
Can you
yeah.
imagine now doing test breedings? I mean, you'd have,
I couldn't do it.
Yeah. No, this is really good. But we're gonna go ahead and break. We need everybody back in your seats at 10:30. Okay? All right.